Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order, and today is Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022 at 7 p.m. And I'd just like to welcome everybody here for this meeting this evening. We will start out with a roll call.
Ms. Weeks?
Here.
Mr. McGinnis?
Here.
Ms. Hunter?
Here.
Ms. Byers? And Mr. Madewell?
Here.
And I'd like to point out that Ms. Byers could not make it due to a family emergency, so do I hear a motion to excuse her from this meeting this evening?
Move. I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I will move on to explaining the meeting procedures this evening. Okay, in just a moment, the first thing we will do is I'll administer an oath for anyone wishing to speak this evening. You do have to go under oath for this, so I will do that in just a moment. And then after that, we will begin our agenda items, and from there, we will have all of our cases. We'll bring up one case at a time, and staff will present it. After staff presents, the applicant will be able to comment and make any further comments beyond what staff has presented. From there, I will ask any board members if they have questions for staff or the applicant. And then after that, we'll make a motion to open the floor to public comments. And then after that, so it'll be open to public comments. Just a few notes. Each speaker will have about 3 minutes to make comments. And try not to get too repetitive on comments. If something has already been made, we ask that you just acknowledge that and then move on. Also, all of your comments should be directed to the board, not directly to the applicant, and we will then address the applicant if the applicant would like to respond to any of those. Once the public comment floor has been closed, we will then have staff see if there are any comments provided prior to the meeting, and then we will we'll close it for the public comments. And then after that, the board will have a chance to discuss everything, ask any additional questions, and then we'll go through a findings of facts for each case. And then we will either approve or deny the case. And that will be the procedures. So this time, if you are planning to speak this evening, please stand up, and we will administer an oath here. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give to this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, then please say, I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our first order of items on our agenda is we need to approve some previous meeting minutes. And there will actually only be two. We had on our meeting originally four of them, but now that Ms. Byers is not here, there will be two that we can't go through. I will start with the meeting minutes from May 24th, 2022. See if anybody on the board has any comments or changes or questions about that. Okay, do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from the May 24th meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Ms. Weeks?
I agree.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
And Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Okay, so we're good on the meeting minutes from May 24th. Okay, and then the other one we will be voting on this evening are the meeting minutes from the July 5th, 2022 meeting. And again, are there any questions, comments, or changes you have to those meeting minutes? Anybody from the board? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve those?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call on this one.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Abstain.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
And Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of all the meeting minutes we can approve for this evening. There'll be two additional that we'll push off till we have enough. Okay, so let's start with, now we'll go into our new business and open this up with all of our cases. So our first case this evening is VAR 22-08 for 426 Thelma Avenue. A request for accessory structure variances at 426 Thelma Avenue. The applicant is proposing to construct an 18-foot by 38-foot enclosed carport, which requires variances for the required setbacks from the primary structure and side property line and from maximum height. Application made by Audrey Boyd, the property owner. And at this time, I will turn over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Weeks. Good evening, board members. Next slide, please. To introduce the application, the variance application was submitted by the applicant on June 28th, 2022. Subject of request is proposed enclosed carport that requires variances for structure height, structure setback from the house and from the side lot line, and for location. There's a small portion of the structure that would be located in the side yard instead of the rear yard. The property is located at 426 Thelma Avenue, southwest corner of Thelma and Gold Key Boulevard. The parcel ID is M60-253050011. The area is 1/2 acre. Zoning is RSD, Residential Single Unit District. A public notice was printed in the Brookville Star on July 20th, 2022. Letters were mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the applicant's property on July 19th, 2022. Next slide. This gives you an idea of the surrounding area. The applicant's property is kind of in the center at the corner again of Thelma and Gold Key. You can see all the properties surrounding it, either on Garber or within the neighborhood, are all zoned RSD. Next slide. This is a close-up of the subject property. You can see the house and the pool and the fence and the patio in the back. Next slide. The applicant is proposing to construct a custom-built enclosed carport 18 feet wide by 38 feet long or deep by 18 to 20 feet tall. The area of the structure would be 684 square feet. The enclosed carport is to be no wider than the existing concrete driveway, which means a portion of the enclosed carport would be located in the side yard instead of the rear yard as is required by the code. The applicant is upgrading from a 23-foot camper to a 33-foot camper and needs a door that's 15 feet tall, making the overall height of the enclosed carport around 18 to 20 feet tall, depending on the slope of the roof that she chooses. The code maximum height for an accessory structure is 15 feet in the RSD zone. The only viable location really for the applicant for the enclosed carport is the existing concrete driveway that is located at the back edge of the house on the Gold Key Boulevard side. The detached accessory structures are required to be in the rear yard, but the applicant's lot has a 27-foot wide utility easement along the rear of the property, which occupies about half of the existing rear yard. Next slide. The other half of the rear yard is already occupied with a swimming pool, patio, storage shed, and fence. The storage shed, the applicant indicated, would be removed if the variance is approved for the enclosed carport. The applicant proposes to locate the enclosed carport as close to the side gate as possible, and the structure will extend out to the applicant's side property line. The code requires that an accessory structure be set back a minimum of 5 feet from the primary structure, the house, and from the side and rear property lines, and be located outside of any recorded easements. Also of note, the applicant indicated that a rear door would be required at the back of the enclosed carport to allow AES Ohio access to the rear yard for utility maintenance through the structure. This means, in practicality, that the existing gate would be removed and the structure would then form part of the physical barrier around the existing pool. Next slide. This is the marked up site plan that the applicant provided. The darker black rectangle represents where she's proposing to put the carport. The picture to the right is generally what she had in mind then for the carport. Next slide. These are some site photos that I took. They're also included in your packet. Top left picture is kind of at the corner of Thelma and Gold Key, looking back toward the front of the applicant's property. You can kind of see that it sits on a hill. The second picture in the top row is of the driveway where the carport would be located. The third picture at the top is looking down Gold Key back toward the house. You can see the pickup truck that's in the driveway. You have an idea of what that might look like, as you come into the neighborhood. First picture on the bottom row, again, of the existing driveway where the structure would be located. Second picture, bottom row, looking more toward the house on that same side. And then finally, kind of looking uphill from Thelma toward the driveway. Next slide. So after review of the application and all the information provided by the applicant, staff recommends that the board deny the variance request due to the following. The reasons cited by the applicant as practical difficulties, including the topography of the front yard and large utility easement in the rear yard, are not peculiar to her property. Other properties in the Crofton Woods plat share similar issues. There are no other accessory structures of this size in the applicant's immediate neighborhood, so denying the variance would not deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by others, at least in her immediate area. The existing pool and patio area in the rear yard, although not installed by the applicant, is still considered a self-created condition from the standpoint of practical difficulty. If the variance is denied, the property still retains beneficial use, as the applicant could park their camper on the driveway without a structure to store it in, as long as the camper does not occupy any portion of the driveway that is technically in the side yard. Given the 3 variances required for the structure, staff considers this a substantial variance request, indicating that the area available for the structure is not sufficient to accommodate such a large structure. Next slide. So with that, I would be happy to answer any initial questions that you might have for me.
Yes, Seth, quick question. On the markup of the property itself, you had a black box up there. Would the black box be the shadow area or the footprint, if you will, of the proposed structure?
That's correct. So you can see that it was,
Yeah, could we see that again then?
yeah. Can you go back a few slides? There it is. So you can see where it's kind of drawn in to be where the existing side gate is on that side of the property, and then it would go out to the property line. What you're seeing in between the property line and the edge of the road is about 10 feet of right-of-way that the city owns on Gold Key.
So this structure, the proposed structure will be at the 10-foot line.
That's correct.
So it'll be in the front yard, 10 feet back from the street, or the curb, if you will, and extend back to the side of the pool?
It would extend back to the side gate, and that gate comes out. There'd be a rear door on the structure to allow AES maintenance through the building, or utility access through the building for maintenance purposes.
Now, if AES Ohio has a problem back there with utilities, or they have to go out there and, do some work, if you will, in the easement, it's my understanding that it's very possible that they're going to have some equipment they have to bring in, do some digging or repairs to underline, underground lines or anything along those, those lines. Would this be able to provide them access so that they could do that type of intense maintenance if they needed to get in there? Their easement is their easement. They're going to go through it no matter what.
Right.
I'm just wondering if we approve this and then there is a problem in the future, whether that structure is going to be torn down.
I would ask the applicant to kind of help answer that question. My understanding is that the intention would be to design it for AES to come in with their equipment and get into the backyard.
Well, I understand that, but a back door necessarily isn't going to be able to handle any backhoes or,
Right.
major type of that type of, maintenance that need to be done. If somebody has to walk back there, that's one thing.
Yeah.
If somebody has to drive a cat back there, it's quite a different story.
And I think in that event, what could happen is that some of the existing fence could be taken out by AES to access that utility area if needed.
Okay, I was curious about that, and also curious about the size of the footprint of the proposed structure. Now, the height is going to be 15 feet or 20.
Yeah, it will be up to 20 feet. The door for the camper needs to be 15 feet. 15 feet is our max height, so to complete the building, it will be higher than 15.
Okay, so that picture that we have as a representation next to it is pretty accurate then?
I think it is what the applicant has in mind. It will be a custom built. She doesn't have drawings yet. So,
Okay, and what's the height of the house today?
the height of the house, I'm not positive on. I don't have any way to measure that.
I had the idea, just by looking at the house itself, it looked like it was either a tri-level or a ranch?
Yeah, being up on the hill, I'm not exactly sure how many levels or the exact height.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
On that picture, can you explain, it's, on the rear yard, it's the variance request for the portion that's enclosed that would be located in applicant's side yard? I guess, make sure I understand which is the rear or the side.
Yeah.
So with it being a corner lot, that gets a little
Can
confusing.
you go forward a slide to the site photos? There it is. And again, the pictures are in your packet, but I guess I'd refer to maybe the first one on the second row. It's kind of angled toward the driveway. There's just a little portion, and it's not much, it might be up to a foot of the driveway that goes beyond the back wall of the house. And by definition, in our code, anything in front of the back wall of the house is side yard.
Okay, so looking at this picture, to the left, you're saying it goes to the left there?
To the left of the truck.
Okay,
yeah.
so that's that extra foot or
Yeah,
so
just
that
that
would have
extra
to, okay,
foot.
so that's what
Yep.
that variance part of it would be for. Okay,
Exactly.
that makes sense.
Yep.
And then the other part, I just want to make sure I understand, the setback, a variance would be required for the minimum setback from the primary structure. So it has to be set back for 10 feet because it's adjacent to a side street? Is that what it, I just want to make sure, like,
So
where would, in that picture, I guess probably the lot picture, where would they have to have it set back to compared to where the proposed is? How far back would it have to be?
You got the clicker? I'll use the laser pointer. Turn it on.
I just want to see how big of a variance it is.
Sure. Okay, I will do it on the TV screen. No, I will not. I will do it on the, do it over here. So, I believe the city's right-of-way comes to about right here. So this is where the tapers begin for the approach. So I think it comes about right there. So what we're saying is this is the side property line. She would need to be 5 feet back from that, and then 5 feet offset from the house. And she's proposing a 0 setback in both of those locations.
On both of those? Okay, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just want to visually make sure I understood.
Just
What that was.
clarification on the height. The gate has to be a minimum of 15 to accommodate the camper.
The applicant has told me is that for the camper that she's looking to get, she needs a 15-foot high door.
So that would indicate the total height would have to be somewhere between 18 and 20.
Correct. Will have to be, depending on the slope of the structure's roof, it will have to be certainly over 15 feet.
I was trying to put this into perspective, looking at it, and reading through the application, and looking at the typical Bluebird bus for schools.
Yeah.
This proposed camper is only slightly smaller in length than that, but it's roughly the same height and obviously the same width. So I guess for comparison purposes, that's what I've got set in my mind,
Yeah.
is that size of a vehicle.
Yeah, I don't know the exact dimensions of a bus, but
Yeah, I was looking it up, and it's about
Yeah.
30 to 39 feet.
it's a good picture of the size.
Okay, thank you.
Is the intention that when AES needs to access the property, they would drive their equipment through the proposed structure?
I think that's the intention, either a rear door or possibly a side door. Either way, portion of the existing fence would be removed. So when the door is open, then they could access.
Okay, and not just a person, big machinery as well?
That I'd have to ask the applicant to respond on.
Okay, I'm just wondering about the practicality of doing that if the structure is filled with a large camper.
Yeah, you'd have to empty it and put everything somewhere while it's being worked on. That's correct.
All right, any other questions for staff?
Just clarification, one, again, going back on what Bob said about getting a big piece of equipment in there, a side door to me would not seem practical, because how would you radius to turn to
Make the
get out of
turn,
that?
right.
If you had a big piece of
Yeah.
equipment, does that make sense?
That's a valid point.
It would almost have to be a rear
Almost, yeah.
door.
I think you're right.
Okay,
right.
thank you, Mr.
Thank
Dorman.
you.
Okay, can I have the applicant come forward? And when someone comes forward, please state your name and address for the record. Thanks. Come on up to the, come on up all the way to the microphone. Thank you.
Audrey Boyd, 426 Thelma.
Thanks, go ahead.
I did want to clarify a couple of things. First of all, I've been asked by the city on 3 different occasions to move the camper. When I do park it in that driveway, someone generally calls within an hour and complains, and the city does tell me I cannot park it there. So there's always a dispute as to whether that is the side yard or the backyard because of where the house ends. It's both. So it really does leave me no place to park that item. And I'm paying close to $10,000 a year to store it, which I don't want to have to do. I could build the carport for that much and not have to pay that every year. But in addition, the truck itself is larger than the actual driveway, so that's a $90,000 truck I can't get out of a hailstorm. So I really am looking for something rather large to store both of those items. I've measured the setback from the street. The 38 feet is 12 back from the curb. So that leaves the 10 feet city right away and then an additional 2 feet. So that's a 3-foot variance I'm asking for there. And the side yard really is just about the space of that white gutter. It's like a foot. And that's because we can't really decide where the side yard is. As far as the DP&L access, I actually was proposing 2 things. If you look at this photo over here where you can see the fence, DP&L's right-of-way is actually over here. But they don't like to use that because they don't really like driving that heavy equipment on the grass, but that's really where they're supposed to go. They generally ask me to open my gate because they want to go down the concrete patio that runs all the way down the back of the house. The 15 feet for the equipment they've brought in, I've been here almost 10 years, and they've done work on the transformers nearly every year because the power always goes out. Somebody's trees always hit those lines, always. The 15-foot would accommodate their cherry pickers and most of their other, if I had doors on both ends, they really could continue to just go down the patio the way they like to. But if I had to, I could put a gate further into the yard that's actually in their easement, and they could continue to go in the gate the way they always do. So I don't really think access for DP&L is a problem. It's never been a problem. I am proposing that the building does function as part of the gate. And part of the reason for that is because if I set the building forward of the gate, and then I have 3 feet and then a gate, it leaves the ability for somebody to come around behind and break into the back of the house and nobody will ever see them. I think it's a security issue. I would rather set the building back to the gate and just put a gate in the yard if I need to. I very likely would do both. I'd put the garage doors in and then still put the gate in. But I've never obstructed access to DP&L, and I don't really intend to. Obviously, if my power goes out, I want it back on just as much as anybody else does. And then as far as the size of the building, I do need the 15 feet. It is a fifth wheel that I'm looking at, so they do have a little taller clearance. But as far as the length, it is just about the size of a bus, but that driveway is already 2 cars long and 2 deep, and I'm proposing about 2.5 long. So if you're coming from Garber down, you won't see it at all because the tree line will block it. If you're coming from this way, the building will still end before the tree line. It will still leave almost a car length to park in front. The driveway is very long already, so I don't know, I'm not trying to build anything that would look strange. I'm an appraiser, I want my house to appraise, obviously. I wouldn't build anything that I thought was gonna just look aesthetically weird or block the view of anybody driving or anything like that. I don't know if you have any other questions I could answer.
So when DP&L needs to access the property, do you usually get advance notice of that? Or would it be something you would have to accommodate on short notice?
Almost always, they let me know. They rarely need to get into the property just to connect somebody or anything like that. Generally, if they need into my yard, it's because the transformer has blown. And they don't usually have to call me. Usually I'm working from home and I know the power's out. So usually I have the gates open and I'm waiting for them because I know before they do. But they have my phone number. The only other reason they need to get back there, the transformer and to read my meter, but they've put all the digitals on now, so they don't really. MetroNet needs in there more often. The internet company more often is connecting people, and it's a more frequent thing with them. And they just knock on the door, or they climb my fence, to be honest. They don't even bother to check if the gate's unlocked. I've caught them climbing it several times.
So you would be parking the camper and the truck inside the proposed structure?
I would, but if DP&L needed to get in, their equipment is not overly wide, it's just tall. Generally, I think I could probably just pull the truck out, but if I needed to pull the camper out, I could, because they're both there, so. But like I said, I'm thinking about putting a gate in the side anyway. If it was an issue, I'd just open the gates, it's, you know.
I have a question. So the 38, you're going for a 38-foot length. Would you need that entire amount is that to accommodate both the camper and the truck, or?
The truck is, it's 22 foot long. If I put the hitch on, it's 24. The camper is 33, and then another 5 for the hitch. But that leaves me a little room to put pool equipment or whatever. It leaves me like 3 extra feet to put anything else I needed to.
Okay, thanks.
Curious, you said within an hour, people are calling and complaining you have to move the camper. Why are they complaining? Is it?
They just don't like the look of it sitting there. I don't know. I have a neighbor, you know, yeah, I'm allowed to have one of those fire pits 3x3. So anytime I light it, the fire department is there in 10 minutes. The camper, if I place it and I'm just putting things in it so I can pull it out the next day, they're calling within an hour. I don't know. I just have a neighbor that hates anything in my. When I put my trash out and, you know, outside the gate, the trash cans sit, kind of got like a little alcove there. If I have cardboard boxes, they call on me for that. I've pulled a mattress out to take out to the trash, they've called on me for that. I have a neighbor that just, I don't know who it is because they don't tell you who it is, but somebody just hates seeing my things out there. So honestly, I think my neighbors would appreciate it because then they can't see anything I have.
That was my curiosity. If they're complaining about that, would they not?
Everything. They
would they not?
complain about everything.
Would they not complain about a big structure there?
I don't know, I guess, I don't know if they're here, I don't know.
Have they been notified? Do you know if any neighbors
Well,
have been notified?
Seth sent out letters, so. I think I just have
responsible.
somebody who's kind of a neat freak that just doesn't like clutter. I can't answer, I don't know, I don't really know my neighbor. I know 1 or 2 of them, but I don't know many of them.
Well, that's my concern. If they call about the camper being, I'm just curious again.
Yeah,
You can move the camper, but if they call about the building, what are you going to do?
but once the building's, I mean, this is their chance to complain about the building, if they, then what, I don't know.
I just did some quick arithmetic, and if your truck is 22 to 24 feet and the camper's 33, You know, you're talking 55 feet. Now, the structure itself that you're applying for
Oh, no, no,
is-
no, no, wide. It's a two-car driveway. So, yeah,
So they're going in there side by
side
side.
by side, yeah. Yeah, like,
That's what I'm,
it's a very large driveway. I mean, it looks like it was built for, I mean, clearly, that's where the storage in the yard is, if you've seen the photo. There is no other storage except that driveway. There's no other usable space in the yard, so. But yeah, side by side is what I'm thinking.
that helps.
Not
thanks.
long, definitely not long.
How tall is is the home?
That I honestly don't know.
Is it a one-story?
It is a one-story.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a ranch. I wouldn't go taller than the house itself, obviously. That picture that I was proposing, and it had one short door and then one very tall door, I was presenting that more to show the design, but that second door on that tall side was much larger than the one I'm proposing. That short door was 12 foot, so I'm proposing like 8 more feet, not like 20 more feet.
Could
But
we see
still,
that picture again?
somewhat of a similar
So-
looking design. I want it to appear and be used as a garage. Yeah.
So you're talking about the one on the right.
Yeah, that one on the right is a picture of a 12-foot door, and I'm proposing a 15-foot door. That tall door is more like a 20-foot garage door. That's much taller, well, slightly taller than what I'm proposing, but I just wanted to give an idea of like the quality and the sort of design I was thinking more than, I'm not really trying to go like 2 stories tall, you know?
No, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
So the actual door, as we're looking at it, would be probably a roll-up door.
Yes.
And you're talking about 15 feet to the top of,
To the
if you will,
top of the door, yeah, so like if you pictured that second door, just maybe 1 or 2 slats above the window, not that tall by any means, but.
Sure.
Because then it would be much taller than my house, that would look insane.
And what type of roof you putting on it?
Well, that I want to talk with the contractors about. I might go with metal or I might go with shingle, but like I said, I want it to aesthetically appear as a garage. I want it to conform to the rest of the structure. So I'm thinking, I'm either going to do like a vinyl siding, because I'll have it custom built. I'm not going to buy a kit. It'll either be some kind of full metal construction or a vinyl sided shingled construction.
And what's your house sided with and everything right now?
Right now, it's brick, and it's got aluminum siding, but I'm probably going to replace that with hardy board in the next year.
Okay, any other questions, comments from the board for the applicant?
This one, Seth, this is for Seth, really. Was the neighbors contacted?
Ooh, that's like a full step.
Yes, the neighbors within 300 feet were provided in the mail a letter, yeah.
No response then?
No response at this time. Yep.
How many notifications did you send out?
I'll get you a count here.
Okay, anything else for the applicant? Thank you, Ms. Boyd, I appreciate it.
That was 23.
23? Thanks, Seth.
Okay, at this time, we can open the floor for public comments. Do I hear a motion to open the floor?
I move we open the floor.
I'll second it.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment about this variance request? Okay. And then Mr. Dorman, you said there were no comments that you had received, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to close the floor for public comment?
I move we close.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so at this time, we will open it up for discussion among board members and ask any additional questions, and we will then go through our findings of fact.
I guess I have a comment, and I'm going to address it to the board. Apparently, the applicant has been working with the city to try to, get some relief on the construction and design of this enhancement that wishes to be done to the home. Suss been rather diligent in putting together, concerns, and I agree with them. They are substantial. There's a lot of change here. And I'm curious as to how those discussions went. And, is this the most reasonable solution that has been found with the applicant in the city?
Well, I would say, I think what's before you is just conversations that I've had and the applicant explaining kind of what she's intending to do. We did not have any conversations about sort of modifying the size of the structure or anything like that. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Dorman. For the applicant then, and I'm wondering if you could come up here again. I'm sorry, this is part of the discussion now. Thank you again, Audrey, and you've already introduced yourself and you're with. Are you hard on with this particular way? What we're struggling with, I think, a little bit here is that there's an awful lot in front of us. There's an awful lot of change associated with this. It's a big change.
Yeah.
And, and I guess my question to you is, are you open to working with the city more to try to come up with something that would be more conforming to the permitted uses that we have today? Because I really hesitate to approve an application like this, because what that'll do is that'll set a precedent. And that
Everybody.
precedent will be potentially pretty dangerous.
Sure.
And it does go outside of our code. So I'm wondering if there's a way that, you could think this through a little bit more and perhaps come up with either a better design or a better solution. We're talking about utility access. We're talking about side door. You got a busy property,
Well, and I guess what my
understand
question would
that.
be then, I'm not really willing to go, the building's got to be large enough to be useful, or there's no point building it. So it's kind of, well, do I look at building the structure, or do I look at buying land and trying to build a house and move? Because there's so little of the yard that is usable. I cannot build anywhere in the backyard. Everything is utility easement. You cannot build in the backyard. Everything along the side yard is either core drills for the geothermal or water lines, gas lines. And the front is on a massive hill, and it's got water lines going through it. And then the other line is half my neighbor's yard. There is nowhere to go. I guess I'm willing to work with the city, but I don't see where, I can't go forward because you own that. I can't go backwards because the DP&L owns that. I can't go sideways because the utility company, where do I go? So.
That sounds like a paraphrase of President Johnson during the
I
Vietnam
guess,
War.
I'm absolutely willing to work with the city, just so long as the building doesn't end up so small I can't fit the things I'm trying to put in it,
I understand that, and I can appreciate that. And as an appraiser, I think you can appreciate the fact that you are hamstrung here a little bit.
Yeah, I absolutely am.
I mean, you really are.
And I guess.
And I'm looking for the future then, too, because if and when you sell the property, you say to yourself, how saleable will this be? What will the new owners
And
do?
I guess part of it is I'm looking at it and thinking, how saleable is it right now? And you can't store your pool equipment. You can't, the garage was built too small for today's cars. You've got, so everybody who's ever owned that house, and I've had a few family members before me, have all complained about, where do you put your things in here? And something that appears to be, even though it's a carport, appears to be a garage and functions as a garage, I think overall would increase the property value. Realistically, I do. But I do know that it doesn't conform, which is why I was kind of cognizant of trying to stay back from the tree line. The good thing about that driveway, I think it was put there because when Gold Key built that, I think they intended that to be storage, because there's nowhere else. That pool's original to the house. It was put in the 50s. It's a Dayton pool. It's got the medallion on it that has the date it was put in. So I think Gold Key always intended that to be really the storage area, the useful area of the yard, but I don't know, I am kind of hamstrung on it, you know, but I know I don't want to keep paying the storage fees I'm paying either, so, but I am open to, you know, like I said, changing the gate, adding a gate, as well as maybe the roll doors to making things easy for DP. I am open to ideas. This is just the best one I could come up with, really, is where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I can also appreciate where you're at, you know, and what you're struggling with here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I am an appraiser. I understand zoning, you know, I work with zoning all day. So I know I'm asking for multiple variances, but most of them are just a couple feet in any direction, really, except for the length is
Yeah,
the big one.
I know.
You know, the side yard setback and the height, they're just a couple feet here and there, but the length overall is large. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that, and, you know, whatever we decide, you know, I'd
I'll live with.
but I'd certainly hope that you'd continue to talk to the city and
Sure.
see if you can't figure something out.
Well, and the conversations with Seth is, if I get it approved, then I've still got to go find the builder, and I've got to get the plans, and I'm perfectly willing to submit those and have everything surveyed out and whatever, have the city look at it before I start construction, absolutely. No problem with that.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yep, I'm sorry, any other questions from the board for the applicant?
Thanks. Okay, any other discussion among board members before we start doing the findings of fact? I think I'll just state that I think that one of the hardest things it is that the length of this could be very overwhelming for that property. I mean, I understand the need for the length from the property owner's aspect of it, but I do see that being pretty overwhelming.
I see the length of it, I see the height of it, you know, variance for the side and everything. I understand it's corner lot. Corner lots are a little bit obtuse anyway when you're trying to define which way is which. I was on a corner lot. My mailing address was not on the short side, it was on the long side. So, you know, it happens. I understand that. But when I wanted to do some, you know, a little bit of work there, I had a real hard time, you know, trying to sort through what the definitions were, and I'm on the board here, so I'm like, so I understand, but there's an awful lot of changes that are in this application.
Okay, ready to go through the findings of facts then? All right. Would everyone like to go through them, or I can? Doesn't matter to me. Okay, I will go through them, and I will take comments as we go. All right. So what we do now is we go through our findings of facts, and we have 7 items we discuss for each application. So I will begin. And, you know, the conclusions we get off of this do not necessarily mean that we have to agree or disagree with all of them to deny or accept the application. So we will start with number 1. Special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not applicable to any other land, structure, or building within the same zoning district. I guess I'm going to start with this as far as saying disagree with that because there are similar properties in this zoning district and within the same plat that are on corners that have easements, some of them even larger easements than this one. So it is typical for this type of neighborhood to see these types of issues. So that's what I would say on number one. Any other additional comments on number one? Okay, number two. A literal interpretation of the planning and zoning code would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other property owners in the same zoning district under the same provisions of the planning and zoning code. For this one, again, I'm going to disagree just because there are, as staff has stated, there are no other properties in the surrounding area that has similar height and size structure, so it would not necessarily preclude the applicant from the same rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same area. Any other comments? Okay, number three, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. This one's a little different, kind of agree and disagree with this one as far as there are things such as the easement, which is not necessarily, that's not a condition because due to the applicant. However, other issues, as far as the placement of everything else, the pool and such, while again, not necessarily the applicant's direct actions, it was, the property was bought by the applicant with those features already there. Any other further comments on number three you guys want to discuss? Okay, let's see. Granting the variance requested will provide the minimum necessary relief to alleviate the practical difficulties the applicant is experiencing. Well, I would agree as far as from a financial perspective, it would obviously make sense for the applicant to do this, but that is, again, that's on the applicant. I kind of have to disagree with this just because there are other options for the applicant. She can continue store offsite while that is expensive, or not purchase the size camper she would want. We can get a smaller size storage, carport that would be within the code. There are other options.
I would certainly agree with that. And the other thing is that, as we discussed, there are other options that probably should be explored by the applicant with the city to be able to see if there is other solutions that maybe we can come across here.
Okay. Anything else on that? All right, number five, granting the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the planning and zoning code and will not cause damage or harm to the neighborhood or otherwise be detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare. Any comments on that one?
Yeah, again, we discussed utility access in the back through the easement. If power's out for an extended period of time because of, AES Ohio cannot have access in the back there for one reason or another, that would be a problem. The construction of a building of this size is not necessarily in harmony with the residential flavor, I would think, of this particular neighborhood. I can understand the need for it. I can understand the rationale behind the request. But when it comes to compatible use, and it was pointed out that it's possible that some nefarious creatures could try to break into the house and use that as a shield. So there could be a risk of crime, in the future when it comes to robbery, because they could use this building as a shield. So whether it's harmonious or not would be in the definition of the word, but I would think that harmonious with the general residential flavor of the neighborhood, it is not.
Just a comment from me. There's so many variance requests. I mean, there's so many, there's three, I guess. But falling back on what I think Bob said earlier, or someone said earlier about setting a precedent. And then once you set that precedent, it's hard, I think our job is to make sure everything is done in sequence and done as close to code as possible. Once you set that precedent, it's really hard to come back and say no to someone.
I would agree. All right, number 6. The proposed variance will not constitute a change of zoning district, including a variation in use on the official zoning map. In no case shall the board approve a variance for a use which is not a permitted use in the zoning district in which the land, structure, or building is located. I agree with this. It's not going to change any zoning usage or anything like that.
I agree, and the other thing to consider here would be how busy the lot is anyway, the current uses with the pool, with the size of the structure, and with the 3 variances that are required. It's not an official change on the zoning map. However, it's still a significant change to the RSD district.
Okay, then number 7, other relevant factors that may assist the board in weighing and balancing the public and private benefits and harms to determine if the requested relief is necessary, with the exception that no conforming use of neighboring land, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district, and no permitted or non-conforming use of land, structures, or buildings in any other zoning district shall be considered justification for approval of the requested variance. Anything else you guys want to add? This is just kind of, any additional comments?
Yeah, I think that, we discussed the size of the proposed vehicle, and putting that out into the behind the rear wall of a house, I think would be appropriate. That's a way to get around this a little bit without building the structure. And again, you're talking about the complexity of granting 3 different variances for this particular use. And if a lot of them would be not necessary if there was additional way of parking the camper, perhaps toward the rear a little bit more. It wouldn't take much, I would think. However, it would still make the property a very busy property, when it comes to land use the way it exists right now, specifically with the limitations on the side where you already have utilities out there. You've got utility access required in the back. It kind of goes on, and it's a very tight property to work with. If this was an agricultural area and we were talking about 50 acres, we probably wouldn't be having these discussions, but, the size of this lot, how busy this lot is, and the placement of it within a residential area, I think are things that we do need to consider.
Okay, anything else on number 7? Okay. The next is based on the above, the application, we should decide if it meets or does not meet the standard for variance approval. I'm going to say it does not, because we did not really agree on any of these. So therefore, we need to have a motion to either approve or deny this variance request based on these findings of facts.
I move that we deny variance VAR 22-08.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
And Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Board, we appreciate you coming forward and giving us the information and appreciate your time.
And please, if you could continue to work with Mr. Dorman, maybe you guys can brainstorm some ideas and come up with something. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, on to the second variance request this evening. The next one is VAR 22-09. It's for a rear gravel driveway at 7090 Taywood Road. a request for a variance to allow a gravel driveway that was installed along the side of the house and into the rear yard where a detached accessory structure is proposed. Application was made by F. Joseph Hall, property owner. And I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you again, Chair Weeks. Next slide, please. To introduce the application, the variance application was submitted by the applicant on July 11th, 2022. Subject of request is a rear gravel driveway that the applicant has installed, which requires a variance from the city's new code section 112102H, residential driveways, which requires driveways to be constructed of a durable and dustless hard surface of asphalt, concrete, or other suitable material capable of withstanding 1,000 pounds per square inch. Property is located at 7090 Taywood Road, east side of Taywood, north of Old Salem Road. Parcel ID is M60-03107-0092. The area of the lot is 1 acre. The property is zoned RSD for residential single unit district. A public notice was printed in the Brookville Star on July 20th, 2022, and letters were mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the applicant's property on July 20th, 2022. Next slide. This is surrounding area. So on the east side of Taywood and then south side of Old Salem, you see properties that are zoned similarly RSD. To the left side of Taywood and north of Old Salem is an area subdivision in the city of Inglewood. Next slide. This is a zoom in on the subject property. This is an aerial from 2019, so it shows the driveway as it was and the existing shed there in the back. Next slide. So the applicant has installed a gravel driveway from the end of the existing asphalt driveway, which ends approximately 5 to 10 feet behind the front of the applicant's house, to approximately 150 feet to the east, terminating in the location proposed for the relocation of the existing 12 by 16 foot shed. The gravel driveway installed by the applicant is 14.5 feet wide according to the applicant's plan. The purpose of the gravel driveway is to serve the proposed 16 by 36 detached pole barn that will be located approximately where the existing shed is located now, and to serve both the existing shed and its new location, and which would be behind the proposed pole barn. Next slide. These are site photos. Top row, first picture is just from across Taywood looking at the front of the house. To the left portion of the driveway at the street, you can kind of see a new area. So that had been previously graveled. The applicant has paved that at the city's request. The second picture in the top row is where the existing driveway ends by the house and where the gravel driveway takes off from there. The next two pictures are again just of the gravel driveway, and then on the bottom as well, but you can kind of see the shed and where the shed will be relocated at the end of the gravel, and where that shed is now is where the pole barn is proposed. And also in those pictures, you get a view of the rear of the house. Next slide. After review of the application and all of the information provided by the applicant, staff recommends that the board deny the variance request due to the following. There are no special conditions or circumstances that exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved that would prevent the applicant from reasonably complying with the planning and zoning code requirements for residential driveways. The only legal exception in the planning and zoning code where gravel driveways are permitted is for lots of 3 acres or more, and only from behind the house to an accessory structure, but in no case shall vehicles be parked or stored on any gravel driveway. The property still has a beneficial use without the variance. Without a driveway behind the house, the applicant could drive their vehicles back to the proposed pole barn and the existing shed long enough to unload their equipment and supplies, and then return the vehicles back to the paved driveway. The proposed variance is substantial. It would be a precedent-setting variance, as no citizen in Clayton currently has a legally permitted gravel driveway, and the applicant's variance request, in effect, does ask the city to turn their back on a change to the planning and zoning code that was approved earlier this year by City Council and became effective on April 2nd, 2022. So as I said, it's a very new section of code. As mentioned above, the legislation does offer an exception for the gravel driveways, but the applicant's property does not qualify for that exception. Next slide. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any initial questions that you have for me.
So the driveway's going to go past where the current barn is? It goes past, or is it going to end there where the current?
Where the current shed is?
Yeah.
It would go past where the current shed is, and does go past.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Mr. Dorman.
Thank you.
And at this time, can we have the applicant come forward? And again, come on up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name's F. Joseph Hall. I go by Joey. This is my wife Kathleen.
Hi.
And we reside at 7090 Taywood Road in Clayton, Englewood, whatever you want to call it, because nobody seems to know where it's at, especially the GPS. We're asking for a variance because the copy of the code that I was given, 1121.02H, reads, residential driveways which requires driveways to be durable and dustless, hard surfaces of asphalt, concrete, or other suitable material. That's pretty broad. Now, what I put down was crushed limestone. And if you know anything about building material, the reason that I did this last November was because I wanted the winter to sit on it and the spring, and it compacts. It is dustless. I took a 60-mile-an-hour blower out there and tried to blow dust up with it. It moved some of the pebbles. There was no dust that came up at all, none. That's number one. I bought the house in September. I come down and I checked with the city in October. And I didn't get a name, I wish I would have. Mr. Dorman wasn't in. I talked to the lady at the window, and she had some fella come out. I told him that I wanted to put in a gravel drive, that I was looking at building a pole barn next spring, which would have been 22. And he said, yeah, that's fine. Never told me to read the code, never referred to the code at all, just said, are you doing it to go back to the barn? And I said, yes, that's what I'm doing it for. Okay, fine. Well, Mr. Dorman says that previously the code did not permit any gravel driveways or parking areas. I didn't find, when I finally got a copy of the code, I didn't see that anywhere until this year, and took effect in April. My drive was put in last November. Now, as far as the front drive that I paved, the intention all along was to pave it, but you have to let chips and dust settle. If you don't, the blacktop will give. That's why I left it. I wanted to leave it all summer, to be honest with you. I wanted to wait until fall, until the very end of the asphalt season, to get all the rain we've had. That chips and dust would have been like concrete by the time I put the blacktop down. I had an inspector come to the house and, nope, you got to do it. You got to do it right now. Had no opportunity to let it settle. If the drive sinks, it's because of this code. And it's a substantial amount of money that I'm out. That's that part of it. Not grounding the variance is going to place a pretty substantial financial responsibility on us. We're paying $500 a month for storage for stuff that was supposed to be in the pole barn in the spring. I'm a retired school teacher on a disability. I can't afford $500 a month for the rest of my life. I can't do it. And if this is denied, and if some arrangement can't be made, there will be a for sale sign in front of my house, because I can't pay the mortgage, pay $3,000 a year to live in this city, and still pay $500 a month for storage utilities. That's, one of them is an hour away, and 3 more of them are over on 49. Oh, this was the other thing. Mr. Dorman told us that we could drive back on the grass to put stuff in the building. So it's okay to have mud and have a mud pit back there, driving in all kinds of weather, but it's not okay to have gravel? Mud dries up, it's going to be dirt. Dirt blows around. That's not a dustless surface. So I don't really understand the purpose of this. I don't understand why is there a 3-acre thing? I don't understand that. To me, I keep my yard up, I keep my house up. That should be what is primary, not what my drive in back of my house is made of. I've checked with all my neighbors, front, back, across the road, everywhere. Matter of fact, my back neighbor's here, and they're all okay with it.
Milling.
I did call Mr. Dorman when he contacted me about the front part. I like to recycle. If you don't believe me, ask the trash man, because he just dumped three barrels of it this morning. And I said, what about filings, blacktop filings, when they churn it up? I said, what about that? He said, I don't know, I have to check into it. Well, he called me back a couple of days later and said, nope, not acceptable. When you put down blacktop filings and roll it with a big, I don't know what they're called, I just call them rollers. A roller, it's just like concrete, it's just like blacktop, and you can seal it. Mr. Dorman's only response was, well, will it be shiny or will it look like gravel? It doesn't say it has to be shiny or not look like gravel. It says dustless and suitable. I don't know how much more suitable I can get than blacktop filings, other than blacktop. And I would prefer not to use blacktop because it's just another waste of material, when the filings would work as well or better, and an enormous cheaper. It's $8,000 to pave what I have in gravel right now. It's about $3,000 in filings. You want to tell them anything?
One thing I did want to point out that was in Seth's report and my letter of intent was the current code says that residential driveways from the back edge of the driveway approach to the primary structure shall be constructed of the durable, dustless, hard surface, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't say anything from the front of the house to behind it. And so that's one of the reasons I was arguing about the gravel, which we call crushed limestone because it acts more like dustless surface. And I think that needs to be looked at. And I too also am curious to know why they drew the line at 3 acres instead of an acre. Because quite often people with 1 acre are going to want an accessory structure and going to need a driveway. And for our purposes, because we're reenactors and we teach living history, we have to have this building to store all of the equipment that we use, that we travel all over the country and we teach people about the way that our country came into being and the skills and trades that were used here. And so, right now, we're having to keep it all in storage, like he said, and that cost us $500 a month. We have the money to build the building, but we don't have the money to build the building and do the driveway at the same time. And Seth had said something in his cover letter about doing the driveway and then saving the money to build the building, and I'm sorry, but if we're paying $500 a month, he's a retired school teacher. I was laid off from GM when they closed the Moraine Assembly Plant. We can't save money if we're paying $500 a month for storage. So we would prefer, if we absolutely had to build the building first, and then maybe we could say have a set time in which we would pave the rest of the gravel or use the asphalt millings, which is what we would prefer to do because honestly, it looks just like blacktop. So those were some other things that I wanted to add in. I think that the code needs to be looked at and rewritten at the next, whenever you guys do that. He said he will be revising the language. And talking about what was intended, where, you know, how are we supposed to interpret what's intended? Let's see.
I would like to add something. When I first came down in October of '21, the gentleman told me, just check with the county, see what they say. Okay, so I go down and check with the county. They said, go check with the city of Clayton. Y'all, the left hand don't know what the right hand's doing, and I'm stuck in the middle looking at both of you.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate on the applications of standards for variance that you guys will be reviewing at the end on number 1, the special conditions. What we wanted to contest was that we came in prior to this code being revised and were told verbally not to look at the code, but that it would be all right. And then on number 2, the previously, the city of Clayton and planning and zoning did not permit any gravel driveways or parking areas. And then he talks about the parking code permits gravel on 3 acres. And then he talks about staff acknowledges that there are many existing examples of gravel driveways or parking areas within the city of Clayton, but none which have been legally permitted by the city of Clayton. And I'm like, okay, so why aren't they asphalted or, you know, so it doesn't make sense to me that we're being singled out. I don't feel like we're being singled out so much as, why are we the exception to what looks like is a rule? Because if you drive down a lot of these roads, you'll see gravel drives here and there. In fact, I just noticed one today. I saw that was, I had read something about the new code where the aprons have to be concrete now, and they had a gravel apron. And I was like, okay, all right, well, whatever. And then number 3, it is a practical difficulty because we can't use the drive until it's paved, and we can't put the building in until the drive is paved. So we just can't use it for what we need it for. Yes, we can live on it, but we lived in Clayton for 7 years prior to this on Diamond Mill, and we had a pole barn, and we had an asphalt drive and a gravel drive and a gravel pad that we parked our camper on. And we loved it there, and I hate that we moved, but we had to because we had to go from a 2-story to a 1-story. And you know, in this market, it was very difficult to find anything that we thought we could build something that would be aesthetically pleasing. You know, I understand you don't want the city of Clayton to look trashy. And I love the city of Clayton, and I wish we could stay here, is all I'm saying. And number 4, Seth says it seems reasonable that the applicant should pave the driveway first and build the pole barn later instead of asking the city to turn their back on a new zoning standard that has been legislated by city council. And what I'm saying is I don't think it's reasonable because we can't do it. We just can't. And I'm not asking you to turn your back on it. I'm asking you to help us find a way to make it work, is what we're asking for. And number 5, I didn't have anything to say there. Imagine that. And number 7, this blew my mind when I read that we could drive the vehicle back to the barn on the grass, and I thought to myself, so we'd have to take all the gravel out and have it hauled away, and then we'd have to have dirt brought back in and filled, and then plant grass again, which would cost just as much to gravel the drive. So that just doesn't seem like it's viable to me. I disagree with that. And with that, I'm going to set you free from my captivity. Thank you very much for listening. Are you done?
Do we have questions from the board for the applicants?
One quick one. You said back in November you came and asked someone if you
Yes.
could put a gravel driveway in, and they told you yes.
Yeah.
And is
I was
it,
told, I wasn't told to look at the code, I wasn't told to, nothing. Yeah, just go ahead, yeah. Check with the county.
it's
I went
my-
to the county, they told me come back to the city. I'd already been to the city, so I put the gravel in.
Okay, well, it's just my understanding that back in November, it said no gravel driveways under any circumstance, right? But nobody told
I
you
couldn't
that.
find anything in the code that said that.
I-
I looked at the previous code and I could not find it.
Mr. Dorman, do we know what the previous code would have said during that time?
Do you have a copy of it?
While he's looking that up, oh, did you find it? Okay.
So earlier this year, we added a residential driveway section to the planning and zoning code to align with a revision that was being brought before council to chapter 905, which is a part of public services and utilities portion of the code. We came up with this exception because, of adding gravel to larger lots, typically not in subdivisions or plats in the city. Just as an exception to allow a cheaper option for folks who want to get a driveway back to an accessory structure on a larger lot. So that's all that we have in place. But when they would have come in, and unfortunately they didn't get a chance to talk with me back in the fall, I'm not sure who they spoke to. We did have a section in the code, and it was the old 112102H, which has been relocated to a new section, but still is in the code. This applied back in the fall of 2021. The parking or storage of a vehicle or motor vehicle off a paved surface for longer than 48 hours is not permitted in any residential or commercial district or property used for a residence or business. Paved surface shall mean a durable and dustless hard surface of asphalt, concrete, or other suitable material capable of withstanding 1,000 PSI. Parked or stored camping and recreational equipment should not be connected to electricity, water, gas, or sanitary sewer facilities. Camping and recreational equipment, if it's parked or stored outside of a garage, it should be parked or stored no closer to the street than the nearest foundation line of the residence and should be parked on a hard dustless surface. So we did have requirement for the hard dustless surface for the parking and storage of vehicles back in the fall. But again, I didn't have an opportunity to talk to the applicant at that time.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for the applicant?
Could I respond to that? So.
Yes, go ahead.
The way that I interpret that, because I did find that in the code, but I'm a little bit of a stickler when it comes to code and stuff. I've had a little bit of experience with that. It says off of a paved surface, but it does not say you can't have a gravel drive from point A to this structure to drive on back and forth. So when they didn't tell us to look at the code, and then after the fact I saw the code, I'm like, well, I didn't see anything about a gravel drive. Not that you didn't allow it, it just wasn't there. So it could have been argued for interpretation, and that's how I took it, so, okay.
Yeah,
So
and
we
that-
need to make that clear. Need to make that clear.
And I think that was the whole purpose of putting in an updated code, because that code that you're referring to goes back to Montgomery County, and Lord knows when that thing was put together. But we'd been following that for year after year after year, and it needed to be updated. It needed badly to be updated. And I think what we may be running into here is an interpretation of it, which, to be honest, is a good thing. Not necessarily for you and your migraine that you're suffering at this moment, but it is a good thing, because what that'll do is that'll help, shed a little light on this particular area, so that for future cases, it'll be clearer not only for the city engineer, but also for the public, and they'll say, oh, okay, well, that's what this means, So called growing pains in some ways, okay? And it happens. It does happen. But I'm glad that we're talking about this, because if we beat this to death enough and come to some sort of a reasonable solution, and again, we don't want to set a precedent. But by the same token, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we take care of what's going on here now. To me, it almost sounds like a grandfathering, because you did some things under good interest in the past, based on the old code that you were directed to go ahead and do, but you didn't get a card from the guy that told you, whatever. I can't respond to that. You can't. None of us can, and if this goes to a court of law, the judge will scratch his head and say, well, unless you can produce that person, I'm not gonna listen to any of that. So, it's just the way the system works. I don't want to get you guys to be crushed by the wheels, okay? So that's why we're talking about it. That's why we're looking at it. So, let's go forward from there, but with that understanding that, in a way, that this is a good thing, because at least we found it, okay? And I do appreciate that. I don't have an answer for you today, right now, immediately, but maybe this is something that we can continue to discuss, for the future. So, again, appreciate that, appreciate what you're going through, all right? I'm not going to sit here and give you any promises one way or another, but I do want you to acknowledge that, yeah, I can appreciate where you're coming from.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
I agree with Bob. One more question. I just
Sorry,
need.
you're not dismissed from school
No,
yet.
you're not.
They don't work real well in here.
I need education. What's asphalt filings? What is that? Is it
It's-
just ground up asphalt?
Yeah, that's basically what it is. If you've ever seen them putting down new blacktop, they come in with them, it's like jaws, and they grind it up and they haul it off. But it's still got the oil, the adhesive is in it, so that when you put it down, instead of putting 3 inches of new blacktop, they'll put 4 to 6 inches of millings and then roll it. And it's as hard as blacktop. Does it, as Mr. Dorman said, does it look shiny? I don't know, because I've never used it. I've never had to use it. But if I get the opportunity to use it, and then in the spring, because you got to let it set, in the spring, you spray it with sealer, I don't know if it's going to look like gravel or if it's going to be shiny. I know it'll work.
And it's hard and it's dustless.
Yep.
Mr. Dorman, do we know why that was denied by whoever you talked to here at the city?
And I would just say the adjective I would have used was smooth, not shiny. We don't want anything that looks like gravel. I talked to the public service director about the filings when Mr. Hall requested that, and he has purview in Chapter 905 to approve other materials, and he indicated no to the filings. I mean, it's something that the city can kind of go back to the table with the applicant on and discuss in a little more detail, because how he describes it, it very well could meet the the requirement. So the question I would have for the applicant, if you guys would indulge, would be, if you were to build the barn, how quickly could you pave the limestone?
Depends on how long gasoline is $5 a gallon. Because
And-
that,
And if we
it's
could
eating
use
into everybody's
filings,
budget.
or if we had to use asphalt,
So, I mean, you do have, with a zoning certificate, you have a year to complete the project, so.
I'm sorry,
You have a year to complete the project with a zoning certificate.
I can try. That's all I can say.
One thing I can add to this discussion, I guess, about the asphalt filings, and my brother's a city engineer, not here, in Columbus, and I know when they go through and they do road construction, there's some machines that they can use that'll take that old layer of asphalt, and not only cut it up, but also go through and recombine it with new materials to do the laydown immediately. And that way, they don't even haul it away, but they use it and reconstitute it for the new layer that's being put down on the roads. And apparently, it's been pretty successful. And that's on highways, not on a driveway. So what you're proposing, I think, may be something that the city engineer may want to consider Seth, and it may be something, an area for discussion to go forward with. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand about the code, and I understand about clarification, and again, I think that's all good, excusing your pain today, but, yeah, for the applicants, but, it's all good, because this is something then that we can use and build on, for tomorrow, or for other people that want to go ahead and use this on acreage that's 3 acres or less, okay, because that's where you are too. And it's not a random type of a thing. It kind of goes along in line with the size of the lots that are in our general larger areas, like off of Diamond Mill that you guys were talking about. You can do a lot more on those bigger properties than you can do in the smaller residential areas. So that's why we have the different districts. Maybe you didn't know that, but that's the way it kind of works. That way you can't just come in and,
Let me say this, we had 1 acre on Diamond Mill, but it was it was narrow but deep. And here, we've got wide, but not so deep.
and there are odd-sized lots, and you'll see those. You'll see those around. Flagpole lots are another one, where you've got a real little area that goes into an area that's landlocked, and it's like 40 or 50 acres. Same sort of problem. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for the applicant?
I had a question. You mentioned laying down gravel and then paving it over quicker than you would have liked to. Is it in your long-term plan to eventually pave the entire gravel driveway that's existing right now?
Ma'am, the minute we got the money, we're gonna pave it. But we don't have the money to do both. The driveway without the barn is useless.
Sure, that makes
Barn
sense.
Without the driveway is useless.
And your preference would be to do the barn first?
Yes, ma'am.
And we already have an existing gravel driveway
Correct.
going to it. If the time frame to complete the paving could be extended, I don't know if that's something we can do or we could recommend, would that meet your needs?
Again, could it? Yes. Will it? Oh.
Yes. I'm going to say yes.
You heard the boss. I know where my bed is buttered.
Anything else?
I've been married 44 years, too.
All right, anything else for applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we are going to open this up for public comments. Do I hear a motion to open the floor for public comments?
Move to open the floor for public comments.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. If there's anyone who would like to come and speak about this application from the public, please come up, state your name and address for the record, and what you'd like to say. Yes. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, did you come in afterwards? We have to administer oath for anyone speaking this evening? Did you do that? Okay. Okay. Let's see, so just raise your right hand, and do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give to this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do. I do. Okay, thank you so much. And again, just state your name and address for the record.
Name is Larry Lewis, and I live on Woodcroft Drive. And I received, the only concern I had about all this, which it gets a lot clearer once you come to one of these meetings, was the gravel and stuff like that, because we ran into people in our neighborhood or our sections that tried to use this just to park stuff on, and it takes down the values. Now I understand a lot of it that I've been here, and what you're saying makes sense to me, is that what he's trying to do, and by working in engineering for the government for years, and also working in concrete and blacktop, I understood everything what he's saying. And it does work, but the amount of time it would take him to do it is going to be the big question, like y'all said, to extend it or give him a period of time. I'm not good at speaking like this. So.
You're doing great.
But everything is clear. My main concern, the reason I was here, is I didn't want the spread over where people were thinking where they could put gravel driveways everywhere. I want to keep my property value right. I sold my other house because of issues and all kinds of stipulations and stuff. And I was a president of something in that area. And so I understand a lot of this. I come here and I listen, and I can understand what he's saying now, which doesn't bother me to a point, but as long as it's done, and if y'all giving him an extension, I can understand. I don't have a problem with it. But if it just stays gravel, I have a problem with it because we got underhanded neighbors. They just waiting for this opportunity to say, well, I'm gonna go do this, and they do it. And I'm sorry. And on my street, I got a couple of neighbors, they said, well, you're the mouth. They said, because I walk the neighborhoods all the time and I catch things, and I actually walk up to individuals and I'll say, did you read the, because before I moved into the area, I read every code, I talked to people before I bought. And so if you're not doing it properly, then I have an issue with it. But like I said, I understand exactly what he's saying. I understand the shavings because my father did that for years. I understand the shavings, I understand the limestone, but I didn't want it to be just gravel for a permanent type thing. And then I understand what she's saying because I've actually drove down Old Salem and there are gravel driveways. And I never could understand that. But then when you come on this side, it's got concrete aprons, this, that, and then you got people with trailers or motor homes, and they extend it with concrete and blacktop because they're very strict over in that area. But like all I wanted to say is I understand what he says and I understand what you're doing, and if something can be worked out where they can do exactly what you're saying and it compromises on everybody, I'd appreciate it because then I don't have these sneaky people coming in with a dump truck at night. And I had a neighbor who actually tried that with a dump truck, and I'm sitting there going, and I'm like, no, this doesn't work. You can't do that. They made him take up all this gravel and move it.
Yep.
And then he had to put down a permanent driveway. That's all,
Okay.
that's about
Yeah,
all.
we
I-
appreciate the comment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Could I, could I ask?
I like knowing that we're on the right track here.
Could I ask you a question before just one quick question? You said you're familiar with the shavings thing. Yes. Okay, and I'm sorry.
Yes,
And Mr. Hall said that they put 4 inches down?
they put 4 inches down, some of it's 3 to 4 inches, some of it's at 6 inches,
And they roll it?
and they roll it.
Is it a
and
smooth surface when they get
It
done?
becomes a smooth surface. Some of it gets like a little of a shine on it, but it all depends on what you do with it. My father used to put it down. When he would put it down like that, he'd put it down, then he'd come along like he was saying, and he would actually spray it.
Yeah.
And then it takes that glare out of it, and it gets really harder in some areas. It'll get harder than what it does on the streets.
The reason I'm asking is maybe that's a path to a compromise. The shavings, because you said it's a substantially cheaper. And you said it does not look like gravel, it's a smooth surface. when
It
it's done.
becomes smooth.
Much like asphalt, normal asphalt.
If they do it right, it'll look almost just exactly like the street if they do it right.
Okay.
If they do it wrong, it'll look like a rough blacktop, like you see on country roads, where they might put stone down and then roll it in, and the country roads look blacktop, but they're a little rougher. It gets like that. But it gets extremely hard, because my father did that concrete, and then I worked with him on that a year, and then, like I said, I worked in engineering for the government for 31 years, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
All of us get nervous talking to other people.
Okay.
And my question next then is for Mr. Dorman, if I may. Thank you.
Can we go on to I think there's another public comment real quick, and then we'll go on to asking staff questions in a second. No, you're good. Were you here to do the oath? I'll just double.
I'm sorry,
Were
what?
you here to do the oath? At the beginning?
I
of the-
did, yes.
You did at the beginning, okay, thank you.
And
I
I'm
just-
here because my husband was later and he didn't. He got out of standing up here.
Well, we can do the oath now if he wants to.
I'm Lori Davis and Darren Davis. We are at 3915 Old Salem.
Thank you.
We're that 5 acres that kind of is surrounded by everybody in there. And we're new around here too. We moved in 2 weeks before Christmas. To let you know, I can validate a lot of what they were talking about simply because when we did the same thing when we moved in, we obviously have a very long gravel driveway. I'll just say that. We do. And I love it because of the country atmosphere. And I love when you had the flavor, you know, is what you said. So when we were looking for a property, we were from Dark County, where pretty much you can do anything you want, anywhere you want, at the time you want. We had a half acre. And I didn't even know Clayton was a town. I grew up in Kettering, and, you know, it was just such a small little, I traveled through all the time. And when we came to see this property, it was like magic. I stepped on it, I went, God has been here. And if any of you have known the Holsingers who owned it before us, you would understand that comment, but I had never met them. When we were talking about the wonderful things we would love to do with this property, you know, we're so excited. We will not get a rooster, I'll tell you that right now. I read that, thank you. I can also say that one of those scary statements was you can drive your car back on the grass, you know, just to drop things off, because there are a solid 4 to 5 months that back in that area, and I'm just telling you, our back area, you can't do it because it is so wet. I mean, we got to the point we had to mow the back acres and it was still so wet. Now, when we cut it now, the ruts are still there and we're bouncing over it. So in concerning the gravel of, you know, what they have done, I have heard you guys be very reasonable. But for one, you know, he had done it before that was in place, and you're willing to work with him, it's great. You know, I appreciate that very much. So it doesn't bother us what he's doing and how he's working it, because we come from an agricultural mindset, and we moved into an agricultural property surrounded by all these wonderful people, and our neighbors have been wonderful. I'll tell you, I'm extremely happy right now. So when I moved in and started talking about how are we going to extend a couple things that we need to extend, and I love the gravel. You know, we want to make a little more parking because it's a very skinny driveway. How can we do this? And I called Montgomery County, and Montgomery County said, no, you got to call the city of Clayton. Like, okay. So we came over here and, you know, talked to Randy and to Seth, and he's very helpful, gave us lots of information to look at. But that's where I would say is we are over the 3 acres, so you'll probably see us, because we do, you know, want to look at doing some things too. But we want to be very careful about this. So we also wanted to come and just speak and say we support what they've tried to do correctly, what they're trying to do now, and, you know, it's the fact that, you know, they're teachers. It's straight to my heart too, because I was. But thank you for listening. Thank you for being reasonable. And you guys have a great community here. I would just say please don't make it so that we would have people move out, because that's why we moved out of Dark County, because of what was happening near us. And so that was just me. We're here for them too.
Thank you, appreciate the comments.
Any questions?
Anybody have any
Okay,
questions?
we'll probably see you guys around.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, we appreciate everything, all those comments. Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to speak? Okay, let's see, actually, before we close the, hang on. Mr. Dorman, I know we got a couple more comments on this. Is that what these emails are from?
Yes.
Let's go through
Wanted
those.
to point out in the staff report that I'd received a voicemail from Elaine Ford at 7120 Taywood. And that's one of the next door neighbor to the north of Mr. Hall and Ms. Geiger. She said she does not object to the applicant's variance request. Received a couple emails, one being from Mr. Lewis, who spoke to us already, so I don't know that we would need to necessarily read that one into the record. Received an email from Rex Dickey, another one of the property owners. I'm not sure if it's an immediate neighbor or within the area. If you'd like, I can read that into the record.
Yeah, go ahead and read that one into the records. So we record it.
From Mr. Rex Dickey, Seth, Stephanie and I received your letter regarding a zoning variance request by F. Joseph Hall. We have no objection to Mr. Hall's request. Rex Dickey, 7085 Taywood Road. And that's all for additional public input.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to close our public comments at this point? Oh. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, do you want to ask a question about public comment? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious again about this filings from the asphalt. Is that something we could look into more to see if, it sounds like it's a nice compromising thing.
Yeah, I commit to looking into those more. I mean, if they are truly done correctly to a smooth surface, I think that would satisfy what the city's intent and would like to see for a driveway surface. What we were trying to avoid was anything that had, kind of a rough or aggregate look to it. So yes, I'd be willing to look into that. It sounds like it would save the applicant some money in this case and, might expedite the paving of the driveway.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate that. And Seth, don't we have a list of approved construction-type materials, and that type of good stuff? And would this be added then to that list so the city engineer can have that as reference? Or how does that work? I'm not sure I'd want that verbiage put directly into the zoning code. However, if that material was available, and who knows, in 2 years, maybe something else will come up even better. So,
Well, and I think that's why in the planning and zoning code, we have the other suitable material so that we can evaluate materials on a case-by-case basis. It's also mentioned in Chapter 905 that the Public Service Director has the ability to evaluate additional materials as well.
that's fair, thank you.
And so that would not be up to this board to decide that. Is that correct? We would not be.
Right, that's an
Yeah.
interpretation and a decision made at staff level.
Okay, just want to verify that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, should we close the public comments at this point? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make
Move
the
we
motion.
close public comments.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so that closes our public comment section. We will now discuss as a board any other additional items we want to discuss or any other questions we have, and then we will go through the findings of fact. I did have a question for staff as far as like the timing. You said that they have a year to adhere to any certificates that you, or any, I guess anything that, any certificates that you issue. Are we allowed to go beyond that, or is that very strict, and is that outside of our jurisdiction here as a board?
When we issue a zoning certificate, and I have an application in my office for the pole barn, the application indicates a gravel driveway, and that's kind of why we're here tonight. But when I'm able to issue the zoning certificate, it's good for a year. Upon good cause, I'm able to extend that zoning certificate, if needed. So in this case, in terms of paving the driveway, we don't have anything in the code that allows for temporary gravel, but in that it's kind of part of the zoning certificate. If the board makes maybe a condition or a recommendation as part of any motion that you make, that's something that that staff can take into consideration in terms of extending the zoning certificate. What we don't want to end up happening is the driveway never gets paved.
Yes, I would agree, yes. Okay. Yes, come on forward.
It will be paid. Don't know when.
Let it be known that the applicant, Mr. Hall, did commit to paving the driveway.
Seth, if the variance is not granted today, are they under obligation to remove the limestone that exists at the moment?
I think what a denial of the variance would do today is to indicate that the gravel is not acceptable that's been put in. I will go back to the public service director and the city officials and talk to them about the filings, explain what we've learned and kind of dig into that deeper, and work with them on a timeframe. Mm-hmm.
Okay, discussions. I kind of have a discussion around the filings. I don't believe that is in our jurisdiction to make that decision, either as a contingency. I believe that should be up to the city and the city engineers and all of them. They understand the specifics behind that type of material better than we do. So I don't believe that should go into our decision. Just wanted to throw that out there as part of discussion.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. I'm leaning toward approving the variance on the condition that the discussions do take place, that the discussion takes place with the applicant so that the city and the applicant both are on the same page with filings, what the final product is going to look like, and then agree to a schedule so that there's timelines established so that the applicant can get started with their pole barn, and the construction of what they need to do, and then continue to move forward and make sure that the driveway is paved according to the city specifications, along with how we've agreed to, use it, whether it be the filing solution or, however the city engineer deems it possible. But I'm almost leaning toward that as a resolution to this particular case. It's without going through and doing an absolute approval or an absolute denial. I don't think a denial would be fair. However, I don't think an approval without at least some sort of a condition attached to it, I think that would be probably the reasonable solution in my own thoughts. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I kind of came to the same end result, but getting there the opposite way. I think it would risk setting a precedent for gravel driveways if we were to approve this variance. Mm-hmm. So I was hoping we would be able to not approve the variance, but add the recommendation that the existing gravel be allowed to stay and their commitment to paving it within a certain time frame would get us all to the desired end result without setting a precedent for other driveways.
That sounds reasonable, too. We can either approve or deny in that particular case.
I'm going to have to lean towards Ms. Hunter. That was kind of my thinking, too, was I don't want to set a precedent for approving a gravel driveway. I just think that we'd have too many of those coming to us, and too many other issues brought about that. Yeah, that would definitely set a precedent. Mm-hmm. I guess for staff, a question. If we deny it, can they come back and get a permit to do the building with it having obviously the paved driveway, but then can we recommend, you guys getting a timeline together with them to make it reasonable? I know they have the year and then, yeah, I know, we definitely want to work with them. I mean, I feel like there's a solution. I just want to make sure we as a board are not setting precedent for other issues down the road.
And I think you're right. I think that if we deny this variance, then that's great, because this variance is for a gravel driveway.
That's correct.
And if it's for a gravel driveway, we deny it. However, we put together a plan in place, which the applicant wants to do, to go ahead and get it paved, then with that extension, with the discussion with the city manager, or, I'm sorry, city manager, the city engineer, I'll continue to call him that, then we can at least put a schedule and a plan in place so that these folks can have their relief. Sure, we've denied the variance, which I agree, we don't want to set a precedent. And then we can work together to get this done correctly in the eyes of the city and to the satisfaction of the applicant.
Yeah, I think that you can word a motion to deny the variance, but you are requesting that staff work closely with the applicant on a solution and a timeframe that is more amenable to their needs.
I agree with that. I think your points are really good. President, I would go back and say again, if it's denied, there won't be any hardship on them as far as having to remove what's currently there.
No, we'll continue to work toward a resolution and a timeframe that works for them. Ultimately, if the work is not done, the driveway is not paved, we would have to take action, in the due process that we have available to us in terms of a code violation. So, yeah.
That makes sense, and I think the applicant is in good faith, wanting to go through and complete the project successfully. So I think we're all on solid ground here.
Okay, with that, let's go through the findings of facts on this case. Anybody like to do this one? Run through them? All right, I will go through them. Okay, so we will go through the findings of facts for this variance. Okay, so this will be the finding of facts for variance 22-09. Okay, number one, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not applicable to any other land, structure, or building within the same zoning district. I'm going to disagree with this. The land is very similar. I mean, there's lots of other lots that are 1 acre or less, and that do have detached accessories and either do not have a driveway or have paved driveways to them. Are there any other comments on number one? Okay. Number two, a literal interpretation of the planning and zoning code would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other property owners in the same zoning district under the same provisions. I disagree. Currently, there are no approved gravel driveways to an accessory structure within this area, according to staff, and that's what I say on that one. Okay. Number three, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. I disagree. It was the applicant was the one who wants the gravel driveway. Anything else on that? Okay, number four, granting the variance request will provide the minimum necessary relief to alleviate the practical difficulties the applicant is experiencing. I disagree with this just because there are obviously other options. We have discussed that. So hopefully with working with city and everything, you guys will be able to come up with a resolution on how to best do this without us having to grant this variance. Number five, granting the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the planning and zoning code and will not cause damage or harm to the neighborhood or otherwise be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare. Disagree. We've kind of discussed this a lot, of how we do not want to set a precedent for gravel driveways. Number six, the proposed variance will not constitute a change of zoning district, including a variation in use on the official zoning map. In no case shall the board approve a variance for a use which is not permitted, which is not a permitted use in the zoning district in which the land, structure, or building is located. I mean, I agree with this, because there's, I mean, it will not change any zoning district or anything like that for this. Do, 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 do. Number 7, other relevant factors that may assist the board in weighing and balancing the public and private benefits and harms to determine if the requested relief is necessary, with the exception that no nonconforming use of neighboring lands, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district, and no permitted or nonconforming use of lands, structures, or buildings in any other zoning district shall be considered justification for approval of the requested variance. Anybody want to add some comments to this one?
I think it's relevant to consider that the project was started under the old code and is being completed under the new code, which led to a little bit of questions of interpretation.
I agree. That's why we can put in some recommendations to have them work closely with staff to try and get it resolved.
Correct, and then that would be the follow-on, is that, yes, we can move to deny this variance. However, the applicant has already gone ahead and began step 1 of a satisfactory solution to, not having a gravel driveway and allowing a driveway to go back to the pole barn that is certainly permissible back there. And that the driveway in question, by working with the city, should be more than acceptable to not be interpreted as a gravel driveway, but to be interpreted as a hard paved type drive that they can use. I would also submit that it doesn't sound like the usage, the traffic is going to be much back there, if we're going to be just using this for storage. So that, that paved driveway should last for quite a while, in my own opinion. I'm not a certified engineer.
Okay. Based on the above, we'll say that the application does not meet the standard for variance. Therefore, we have a motion to approve or deny the variance request. And then if we deny, make sure we include recommendation on it.
Yeah, I move that we deny variance VAR 22-09 with the provision that the applicant continues to work with the city of Clayton to continue to discuss the use of the asphalt tailings and to work forward to the proper sealing and the proper annealing, if almost, of the bedrock that you've laid down already, that has been laid down already. And that we follow the schedule of a variance and of the conditional use, which is 1 year, to be extended at the request of Mr. Dorman. I would think this might be appropriate. Seth, let me know if I'm off track here, based on the construction schedule of the applicant.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes?
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Okay. We appreciate you coming in and
We appreciate you coming in, Mr. and Mrs. Hall. And again, thank you for the discussion. Thank you for the points that were brought up today. We do appreciate your input and your patience, and hopefully we'll be working with you and getting you satisfaction on what you need here. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Davis, for your comments in the back there, too. I appreciate what you, or Mr. Lewis, appreciate what you said.
Yeah, educational. Mr. Lewis says that was educational. Thank you.
okay, we're going to move on to the third application tonight. Are you ready? Sorry, it's getting warm here. Okay. Let's see.
Was it worth the wait, guys? I just want to know.
Okay, so we have VAR 22-10. It's for an automatic pool cover at 6040 Garber Road. sorry, too many papers. Okay, this is a request for a variance to allow an automatic pool cover in lieu of the required 5-foot tall fence with lockable gate. Application was made by Darren and Don Smith, the property owners. And at this time, I will turn over to staff.
Technical difficulties. Do you have the print? Do you mind if I borrow that? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'll start introducing while we wait for this to wake back up. You've got, I think you've got some images and things in your packet that you can refer to as I read. Oh, there we are at site photos. Okay. So the variance application was submitted by the applicant on July 11th, 2022. The subject of the request is an automatic pool cover for an in-ground pool that is under construction on the applicant's property. This requires a variance from the requirement for a minimum 5-foot tall fence with lockable gate. Property is located at 6040 Garber Road. It's on the east side of Garber, north of Westbrook Road. Parcel ID number is M60-03-210-0312. The area of the property is 1 acre. It is zoned RSD, Residential Single Unit District. There was a public notice printed in the Brookville Star on July 20th, 2022, and letters mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the property on July 20th, 2022. I would show you surrounding area. Mostly it's all zoned RSD, both on the west side of Garber, which is a larger field, and then the east side of Garber, the neighbors to the north and south of the applicant, and then the neighbors within the Westbrook Estates plat to the east of the property. I would show you the subject property, although it's an old aerial, it shows a vacant property. We now have a house and a pool under construction. The applicant's contractor submitted a zoning certificate for the in-ground pool, and I guess we're caught up here, with a 5-foot tall fence to, oh, there's subject property. Can you go forward? Okay. With a 5-foot tall fence to meet code on July 18th, 2022. Staff issued the zoning certificate on July 26th, and construction is already underway. The proposed pool will be 16 feet wide by 32 feet long and is projected to be 15 feet from the corner bump out at the rear of the house. I think one of the site photos would show that. It's proposed to be 72 feet from the north property line, so that's the one above the property in question, and then 63 feet from the south property line, the one below, and then 84 feet from the east property line to the lots on, I believe it's Jackie Circle. The applicant's house is surrounded by other residences, all similarly zoned RSD, with similar sized lots on Garber, and several smaller lots in the Westbrook Estates plat to the east, including homes on Jackie Circle and Lindy Court. You have the site photos, I believe, in your packet. So after review of the application and all of the information provided by the applicant, staff does recommend that the board deny the variance request, and that's due to there are no special conditions or circumstances that exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved that would prevent the applicant from reasonably complying with the planning and zoning code requirement for a minimum 5-foot tall fence with lockable gate. In fact, the application for the zoning certificate indicated that the fence and gate would be done to meet code if the variance is not approved. The property is relatively flat. There are existing privacy fences next to the applicant's property, so there should not be a physical challenge to installing a fence and lockable gate at this location. There have been 3 recent variance approvals for an automatic pool cover in lieu of the fence and gate requirement. Those were based on specific justifications that this body applied to each of those individual lots. And the majority of swimming pools within the city of Clayton are surrounded by a fence and gate and do not have an automatic pool cover. Without a variance, the applicant can still install and enjoy their pool in their rear yard like many other property owners in the city of Clayton. And given the relative closeness of the surrounding residents in this area, the 5-foot-tall fence with lockable gate to staff seems to be the safer option for deterring uncontrolled access to the pool. So with that, I would entertain any questions, initial questions that you might have for me.
Just one, is the purpose of the code is totally for safety, or is there some privacy considerations there as well?
I mean, I think privacy is inherent in a privacy fence, obviously. That's something that property owners enjoy with a privacy fence, but the code is generally related to a safety factor and controlling access to the pool.
And maybe I didn't articulate, is that, I'm talking about the privacy of the neighbors, being able to,
I see what you're saying. Yes, I mean, I think obviously that would be a visual block or a visual deterrent from the neighbors having to see their neighbors in the pool. Yeah.
It's difficult to tell from the photos, but Garber's a busy road. Will the pool be visible from traffic driving down Garber Road?
It's hard to say with the pool not in. The house sits fairly far back, and I'm not sure, it didn't kind of drive Garber to think about those angles, whether or not the pool would be visible. Certainly, you might see people on a patio or, sort of getting into the pool, that kind of thing. But it does sit pretty far back from Garber. Mm-hmm.
How many houses are behind that house? Like, how many kind of surround? To tell in the picture if there's.
I think there's, just going off of memory, I think there's maybe 3 or 4 on Jackie Circle, one cul-de-sac up, Lindy Court. There's another few that are proximate. But Jackie Circle and the houses to the north and south on Garber are probably the closest, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you. And right now we'll have the applicant come on up and state your name and address and go ahead and give us any other additional comments you'd like to add.
Dawn Smith.
Darren Smith, 6040 Garber.
I just want to say we are requesting the variances this is mainly for safety. The automatic cover has been proven to be much more safe than a fence, and that's the main reason that we have requested this variance. And we do have Dave from Knickerbocker. He is going to do the most talking for us, if you don't mind. He's the professional about the automatic covers, unless you have any questions for us specifically.
I have a question. Is there any reason why you wouldn't want to put a fence up?
But
I'm not going to say that in long term that there won't be a fence, because we have discussed that as well, that like potentially we will maybe put up a fence. Of course, if we have to, we will. But again, for safety, like this automatic cover is much more safe. But we definitely want the approval for the variance now, just because that is the most safe thing right now.
Okay.
I mean, and
Just a question.
Yeah.
Do you have any other family, children, or anybody that's going to be visiting that may?
oh, visiting, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I was just kind of
No,
curious.
no children live at the house with us, but family would be there, yes.
Okay, good, because that's, primarily when you're looking at pools, you're thinking of kids.
Yeah.
So,
And to that point, I can just tell you, like we asked my nephew to price a fence for us, he has a small child, and he won't even give me a quote now because he knows that we're trying to get this variance and he feels that this is much safer for his child.
okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Oh. Oh, hang on, let's,
Can you introduce yourself up here at the first? before
well,
you-
let's hear, should we,
Thank you.
is he part of the application, or should we have him be? Okay, all right.
Dave Kramer, Knickerbocker Pools, 1869 Willow Green Drive. So obviously, we've talked before. We did two of the variance requests for Cunningham and for Doreen Williams a couple years ago, or last year, one this spring and one last year. That picture was taken in Cedarville this year. That picture was a car that was stolen from a property in Cedarville this year from the resident, where the car was stolen from them, and then the car was crashed onto their swimming pool. The car basically tore the cover, but the car was then basically towed off the cover of the pool. So to just prove what the covers can do and withstand, obviously a fence won't do that. One of the things that we talk about is, and I don't think that your code requires a privacy fence. The code requires a fence. So privacy is not something that's going to be attained by a fence. Could be. Obviously, they might put up a privacy fence, but the fence is there for safety, and I think that's what you guys are really maintaining for putting up a fence. That's what you guys are looking for. You're looking for a barrier. The code, or what you're looking for is a barrier. You're looking for that physical barrier to protect the swimming pool. An automatic cover is a horizontal barrier. It's just not a vertical barrier. And it is a barrier that basically protects the swimming pool. And it is a barrier that is impenetrable to the swimming pool. That vertical barrier of a fence doesn't stop anyone from getting into it, slows them down. This horizontal barrier prevents access. It also prevents, that physical barrier of a fence prevents someone from seeing the pool potentially, if it is a privacy fence. When you put that cover on the pool, it takes that visual of that swimming pool totally away. From a child, if you hide the water, they have no idea it's there. If you put up a barrier like an aluminum fence, they still see it. They can still see that water. They still know it's there. They see those pool toys floating in that pool. They're still engaged to that pool. They still want to be in that water. So the statistics are there. The statistics are proven. I think you guys have seen the packets before. So we still think that the auto covers are a safer alternative than a fence. And that's why we try to provide those access points to the customers to give them that alternative to make that decision as a way to protect the swimming pool. Ultimately, we're looking to give the customer a choice. The worst thing we can have is a drowning death for a swimming pool. That's the worst thing that we could have, no matter whether it's a public pool, a private pool, or a lake or a river. It's the worst thing we can have in our marketplace for basically our marketing. So what we look for is alternatives. That's what we want. So we just want to have them have a safe alternative, and that's what we look for. So I'm assuming you don't probably have any questions about how they work and any alternatives like that.
Because it's new, and I was here just, I think, a week or so when the first variance, and I think you were here maybe. How do they lock it, when they open and close, how do they lock? Is there a way to pry that open, or is it securely locked when it's
So the
closed?
motor mechanism is underneath, the motor mechanism is in the ground. So the motor mechanism, there is two forms of switches. We use typically an electronic switch that is basically it's a light switch. That light switch mechanism has a folding locking lid. So the light switch mechanism, just like a light switch over there on the wall, it's a neutral position light switch, has a folding locking door on it. Once you basically have engaged the switch, once you're done with the switch, lockable lid that goes over top of it, fold the lid down, take the key out after you lock it. There's no access to that switch. There is no way to move that leading edge bar until you basically open that code. The other form of a switch is a digital touchpad, so that you have to enter a 4-digit code to basically engage that switch again.
Thanks.
How about if you lose power?
If you lose power, you can disengage the ropes from the mechanism and pull it closed. Not fun, but it is possible to close. If you lose power and the cover is closed, you can take a 3/4 inch socket drive and go to the motor mechanism, disengage the clutch from the power system, from the drive of the motor, and basically crank it open if you really, really want. Much harder to open than it is to close, but it is possible to close an open cover by disengaging the system, taking the ropes from the pulleys, and basically two people pulling it closed.
So it's nothing that it would take quite a bit of effort and understanding of the mechanics to be able to make that work.
It takes some time. It takes some effort to close it, but yes, I mean, it is possible to close it without power.
And open it.
Much harder to, a customer's probably not opening it. I could talk a customer into closing it. I'm probably not going to go through the effort of trying to talk them how to open it.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board right now?
Did you guys get the first customer that talked about the AES guys jumping her fence? The AES guys aren't swimming in her pool if she has an auto cover on it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Okay, at this time, we'll open this for public comments. Do I hear a motion to open for public comments?
Move to open for public comment.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, do we have anyone from the public who'd like to speak for or against this application today?
Move to close.
Do we have, Mr. Dorman, do we have any feedback from public through emails or voicemails or anything?
No feedback.
Okay, do we have a motion to close public comment?
Move to close public comment.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so now we will move on to discussion and finding of facts.
And I just had a point of clarification.
Oh, yes, go on.
Just so you all have the, all of the information with respect to the code and fencing. So our section on swimming pools does say minimum 5-foot tall fence with locked gates. Pools are required in the rear yard. We have another section on fencing. In a rear yard, fencing is required to be for privacy or containment. We had a rule in there that the fence needed to be opaque, which is you can't see through it. We've reduced that just to benefit residents to a 75% opacity, but you do have privacy baked into that. So.
Okay, thanks. Do you have any discussions before we go through finding of facts?
Obviously, we've approved a few of these in the past, so we as a board are generally convinced of their safety. The difference with this application is the type of neighborhood that it's located in, basically. and specifically the fact that the pool would be in view of several other houses, and, you know, not wanting to think the worst of people that live there who maybe might realize that they're out of town or take an opportunity to go swimming, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's just.
Yeah, another discussion. I know kind of when we started granting some of these variances, we said it would definitely be by case, because city council has not approved this as a blanket, anybody could use it now. Can they come back and do that? Yes, but that's not for us to decide. So I think we definitely need to, you know, again, discuss this one like we have the others. You know, in the others, they were larger lots. They were more, I would say, not as many neighbors around them. So that could be a difference. So I think it just comes down to, you know, going through the findings of facts and determining if we can determine that there's enough favorable differences in this application to go ahead and grant that, or if, you know, if we feel like it's not. So I just want to kind of throw that out there to see if there's any discussions around it. You know, again, I don't want to, it's hard because, you know, we've been talking about not setting precedents. We obviously have kind of set a precedent as far as we are granting some of these, but again, it has been case by case, and we know we discussed that when we originally started these.
I agree with what you're saying. I know in the past with other cases that we have approved, and I believe we've approved 3 covers, they were all on multi-acre lots. They were all in the different, they're not the RSD district, but the agricultural really districts to the west is what the way I remember them. Is that true, Seth?
Yeah,
And I know that there was implied privacy and lack of public access due to the offset of the individual residences that have those pools from general traffic, where they could be observed and seen and say, you know, so they would be an attraction. That's the impression that I get. And it's almost kind of like, I'm going to just allude to the case that we have previously, where gravel driveways were allowed on 3 acres or more, and the applicant was wondering why, you know, that was arbitrary. Well, it's not necessarily arbitrary. However, you know, perhaps when the code is discussed and when it's brought to council at some later date, and perhaps this might be included in there as a permitted use, there may be some factors that would determine whether it is a permitted use or a variance would be required, and part of that might be acreage and placement of the actual property itself. I'm just totally speculating here, but I'm thinking that this is a case that kind of makes us have to think about that a little bit. And I agree with what you're saying. This, you know, we were going to do this on a case-by-case basis. However, looking at individual properties, this is a 1 acre lot versus some of the others that were larger in acreage. And correct me if I'm wrong, or if you can.
Yeah, just to clarify what you're referring to, there were 2, one on Country View, one on Rose Tree. Those lots were, I think one was 1.7, one was 1.89 acres, but both in the Suburban Conservation District, so it's a different zoning. And then we had one that was on almost 9 acres, and I believe that was, if not Suburban Conservation, it was probably Rural Conservation. But they were larger lots in different districts.
That was the one up north, I think, off of
Yeah.
the Sweet Potato up in that area.
That one was Wassler, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. I appreciate that. Whether we want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, and I just also want to kind of point out, like, this is a tricky one because it is definitely about safety. And I don't disagree that the safety of a pool cover, it sounds much safer than, but at the same time, if city council wants to do more of a blanket or have some more stipulations around it, they have data, it's not even included in our code right now as far as nobody can get one of those in lieu of a fence unless they come to us.
Right.
So it makes this a little trickier because, like I said, for safety purposes, I definitely see the advantages of it, and you hate to deter that. However, we do have to take into consideration the idea of a variance and what needs to go into it to constitute the allowance of a variance.
That's where I was coming from. I agree with that 100. I think there's no doubt about the safety of this. That's much more safe, I think, than a fence. You bought Dayton's swimming pool? Knickerbocker did, I guess, some years ago is what I heard. No? Okay. The lady here before, I worked there when in the college, when I was going to college in the summers, building swimming pools. So that's a much safer thing. But the fence, the privacy to me was where I was coming from. And that's why I'm saying with you, you got neighbors, so you have to understand that.
I was happy to hear that the applicant might intend to put a fence up in addition to the automatic pool cover, because obviously that is, the ideal result. You get your safety twice and your privacy. In the past, we've mentioned that having to do both could be considered a hardship. We didn't hear anything about that in the case presentation today. But yeah, a fence and a pool cover meets everybody's goals.
And just as a reminder to the previous 3 variances that were granted, were you to consider an approval for this one, we had done conditions on those 3, namely that the pool cover meet the ASTM F1346-91 safety standard. I think they pretty much all do, but we called it out. And then that the automatic pool cover would remain closed when the pool was not in use. Just as a reminder.
I'm tempted to grant the variance. I don't know if we can put a condition on that a fence would be installed in the future or something like that. But we all agree that they're safe. We have done it in the past. And it doesn't necessarily seem fair to not let some homeowners have a safety feature that other homeowners have been allowed to have without the added addition of a fence or added expense of a fence, even though that would be the ideal thing.
Any more discussion, or you want to go through findings of fact?
I think it's difficult to, and our development director and Jack Kuntz and I have discussed this a lot. He's not in favor of the automatic pool covers, no matter what you tell him about the safety aspect of them. But he's right in that, it relies on humans, both a fence and an automatic pool cover. It relies on humans to lock a gate. It relies on humans to close the pool cover. So it's more complex. It's a little tricky in that regard as well, but.
I guess in this variance request, I don't believe safety was taken into account, but I believe there were other circumstances as far as the property itself. I'm not sure if this one has enough differences in its property, to warrant a variance.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think that is the consideration. That's what I was thinking of when I was talking about the RSD district versus the other districts. The other districts that we have the pool covers and we approve them in, the properties themselves were back set. They were set back quite a far away. They were either on a cul-de-sac or individual, road that goes back, and there just wasn't any neighbors, and I was like, it's fairly straightforward, especially when you're on multiple acres. You put a pool cover down there, okay, everything's good. You got that safety feature. In this particular case, you've got neighbors that are relatively close, and if there was a thought that, because I'm sold on the pool covers too when it comes to safety. Okay, it's not like I don't want to say no to that. What I'm saying no to, I guess, is the additional screening that you would get with a semi-opaque fence that would meet our standards as well, or a privacy fence, or however you want to go ahead and look at that. So it'd almost be like a double Band-Aid, if you will, or a double safety measure, one of which can be really debated as to whether it's really truly safe or not, one of which apparently there's consideration that you've got different people in different camps, some of which really go, with the fence, some of which really go with the pool cover. I think from a Knickerbocker standpoint, we've been sold on the pool covers. If we had pools, we'd probably have one. That's neither here nor there, okay? What we're talking about here is the code, and how we can work within the code to make sure that it's going to be correct. And if this does go to council at a future date for an addition to the zoning code ordinance that we have right now, it may be approved in some of the areas that are more agricultural and not in RSD districts. So, there's a little hesitation that I have here, depending on the size of the lot. Now, a 1 acre size lot is big enough to me, and I'm sure it is to you when you're trying to mow it and it's 95 degrees outside. Having said that, I also know that you're closer to neighbors than you are in other areas. And that, to me, would indicate, or at least tell me, that perhaps the fencing, in addition to the pool cover, might be a good solution for the simple reason that it would offer you a little better protection, based on just the proximity to other people, the public, if you will. Don't live in that particular area, but I do live in an area where I have neighbors, okay, and they're close enough. And if I had a pool in the backyard, I'd probably want a fence up, in my own opinion. And I'd probably supplement it with a cover if I had a pool. But I don't have an in-ground pool, so I can't talk specifically about that. So I guess that's where I'm kind of on the fence. I'm thinking about it that way. I don't know. What do you?
If you'd like, you could come back up to the podium. Please give any other additional information you'd like to. Obviously, this is a little trickier one, it's
Just what you're saying.
not cut and dry.
What you said, you're absolutely right. I was 100% wanted the fence, privacy fence, until I heard about the automatic cover and the safety. I did want the privacy until it came down to the whole safety part of it. And I personally, I guess I just don't understand the difference in 1.7 acres versus 1 acre. Yes, I do get it. I do get there's the residential, I do get that. But when it comes to that cover will be on no matter what, if the pool is not in use and if we are not out there, I don't get the difference in that. So to your point, I 100% wanted the privacy. But to me, you can't get any safer than this.
I agree with you, and I can tell you in one of the cases that we had in front of us that we approved, we talked about building a berm, going up toward Westbrook Road, just to do some shielding from the road itself. And this was in an area that you're talking about, a couple acres, of a lot or something like that.
Right.
Plus screening, trees and that kind of good stuff. So we worry about that, because this is for the public safety.
Right.
And that's part of what we do too. We want to think about that.
Absolutely. I do too.
If nothing else, we want to make sure that the applicant is also aware of that too.
Yes.
So that's kind of where we're struggling at this point.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your comments and thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned you tried to get one quote from a family member, I think, for a fence, and he wouldn't give you one.
Nope.
Did you attempt to get any other quotes? And I'm asking because I think I've heard there's a bit of a price hike with fences and a backlog to get them built.
Yeah.
Can you tell me your experiences?
I have not got another quote. And again, because we went to trying to get the automatic fence for the safety, that's the only reason that I have not got another one. But like I said, it was my nephew. And as soon as, he was working on it, he came over, he did the whole measuring, was going to give me the quote. I asked him about it again because we were at that time, still going back and forth between fence, automatic cover. And when I even mentioned this, literally, do the automatic cover, Dawn, do the automatic cover. So I have not got another quote yet.
Both.
I'm not opposed at all. It was my idea, yes, Darren. I said, okay, eventually, I think that we should possibly do that too.
You going to invite your nephew over for Thanksgiving?
Maybe, no, yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
a privacy fence for our neighbors. They're 2 stories on each side of us, so they can see in. So it's not a privacy matter there. And if you got 75% visibility through a fence, it's not privacy anyway.
25% through it. You'd have 25% through.
25% through, yeah, true, yeah, so you really, that's all I had to say. So.
And that is to my point, you know, of why we're discussing that. You know, and, you know, one thing about regulations and ordinances is that it's really hard to make one set of words apply to everybody, you know, equitably and correctly.
Right. Yeah.
And that's all part of what it is, you know, is interpreting that. You know, if you have neighbors on both sides, both of with, you know, 2-story houses, well, it's something to think about. I don't know, you know. You know, and that's tough. You know, if there's a bunch of teenagers in those houses, it'd be like, wow, let's go over there when they're gone, you know, and all of a sudden you got a problem, you know.
And again, with a fence, they could get in, where with a cover, they couldn't.
Not gonna argue that.
Right.
Not gonna argue that. You know, I'm not gonna argue the semantics of that, because you're right. You're right, I understand that. You know, it's just the location, you know, and how, you know, the size of the lot, you know. And that's what I'm struggling with here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to reiterate, that's where I'm struggling with this on, because we want to be consistent with how we're granting variances. Not just because we've granted one before on this, there needs to be special circumstances with each one on why we're granting it, not just because of the I mean, yes, there's precedent, but again, those precedents were, each one was a unique type of property. They were different from this. I guess that's where I'm struggling on if we can justify granting this variance. I'll tell you, I want to, because I really do think that they're safe. I'm struggling with if in our jurisdiction, what we're allowed to do, if we can grant this based on the certain circumstances. I guess, I mean,
like I said before, it's to me, it's the safety issue is a given. That's not even a discussion. It's, again, where the location is, not privacy from you out looking, you know, the people looking and whatever. That's where I'm struggling, and then the precedent setting in that area, you know, in that RSD area.
Thoughts, Seth?
We have a code in place that requires a 5-foot tall fence with locked gate. I mean, and that's a code that's been set by, you know, everyone's legislators, the city council. So I think maybe it might be time to approach city council and ask them if that's something they would put into the code.
Of course, that'll take time. Yeah, that'll take time.
Yes.
Let me ask the applicant one more time then. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. If you could- You sat all this time and now you get to get a workout. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
What are your thoughts about a fence, a privacy fence?
If I can just tell you this, if we do put up a fence, it's not going to be a privacy fence. It will be a 5-foot-high fence, but it will just be around the pool. I mean, so it won't actually be a 6-foot privacy fence, but it will be a 5-foot, 75%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, in the future, probably do want to do that anyways.
Yeah, well, you're still gonna go with pool cover?
For safety,
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
for strictly
I
safety.
appreciate that, yeah.
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 I reluctant to admit, I have a pool. It's above ground pool, Knickerbocker, and we set it up 5 steps up to the deck, and then we put a 5-foot fence above that as well. And we have a locking gate on it. I enjoy the privacy fence from my perspective. And believe me, if you saw me in a swimming suit, you'd pay to have the fence in, okay? But it does provide some, I don't know, privacy. And I think I enjoy that, and I think my neighbors may as well. Of when we have the grandkids over and everything.
Can I just, the neighbor behind us, like, when the neighbors beside us put up their privacy fence, the neighbor behind them complained. Did you ever think of asking your neighbors about putting up a privacy fence? So, we'll run into that, I guess. I don't know.
Can't win.
No.
That's why I'm hung up on the privacy. I'm not hung up on it, that's my difficult part of
I
it.
understand.
This might be for Seth. So we understand construction for the pool has started, just the beginning. Will that be able to continue, and will they be able to, will you be able to issue your certificate prior to a fence being installed?
They have been issued a zoning certificate for the pool with 5-foot fence per plan that was submitted with the zoning certificate application.
And they have a year from the date on the zoning certificate
That's correct.
to install the fence?
That's correct.
So this is to say they wouldn't have to install the fence, instead they would have to put in this pool cover in lieu of that. That's what the variance is for, correct? Like,
The
that's how we would
variance is
need to
for an
work this.
automatic pool cover in lieu of the required fence, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that would just kind of replace that 5-foot fence part of the
That's right,
certificate. Okay,
yeah.
what you've already approved.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, let's go through through the findings of fact, and then that should help us maybe come up with a few more comments to make it clear on which direction we want to go.
Sure.
Does that help? Okay. All right, I'll just go through them. Okay. Number 1, the special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not applicable to any other land, structure, or building within the same zoning district. I would disagree. It's a very standard lot. Even though it is an acre, there's plenty of other. I wouldn't see anything necessarily special about this lot itself. Okay. Okay, number 2. A literal interpretation of the planning and zoning code would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other property owners in the same zoning district under the same provisions of the planning and zoning code. I think this is where we can talk, so the zoning district is RSD. We discussed how we had approved some of these, but they were not in the RSD zoning district. So at this time, everything within this district, they do have, am I correct on saying this, Mr. Dorman? Okay. So everything, all the property owners at this time in this zoning district, they do have to have a 5-foot lockable fence at this time.
At this time.
Now, that's just currently, if we decide to approve this, then that could change, but.
That's neither here nor there.
Right.
Yeah.
Number 3, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. I would disagree, because they could either put up the fence or they, if they didn't do this, so they would have that ability to do it. Okay, number 4, granting the variance requested will provide the minimum necessary relief to alleviate the practical difficulties the applicant is experiencing. I disagree with this, because, they could put a fence up. That's still a practical change to they wouldn't need the variance. Number 5, granting the variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the planning and zoning code and will not cause damage or harm to the neighborhood or otherwise be detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare. I guess I agree with this one, because we've discussed this to length, that the safety of it isn't, it's from the documents we've received, and we have, discussed this before, that the safety of them are as good as a fence, if not better, but, so I guess I would agree with it from that aspect. Okay, number 6, the proposed variance will not constitute a change in zoning district, including a variation in use on the official zoning map. In no case shall the board approve a variance for a use which is not a permitted use in the zoning district in which the land, structure, or building is located. Is this correct? I believe that's, there's
I
no,
believe that's true, and also, it's some of the struggle and discussion that we've been having, since this is an RSD zoning area, that we're looking for the pool cover in lieu of a fence variance, as opposed to the other districts that we had prior approval of pool covers. So there is a difference in the zoning. We're not making a comparison between the RSD district and the other. However, we can't use the other as a precedent for granting the variance in the RSD, which is the lower acreage.
okay, the number 7, other relevant factors that may assist the board in weighing and balancing the public and private factors and harms to determine if the requested relief is necessary, with the exception that no nonconforming use of neighboring lands, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district, and no permitted or nonconforming use of land, structures, or buildings in any other zoning district shall be considered justification for approval of the requested variance. I do think this kind of, we're saying, you know, we can't justify based on our other, either within the same zoning district or outside the zoning district. We can't use that as justification for granting this, so there was no precedent set by the other ones. This is it's its own standalone case.
And there are no physical reasons why they couldn't install a fence. So, you know, there's nothing really standing in the way. However, if a cover was installed, then, of course, we'd want to make sure that it was ASTM F-134 or 134-6-91 standard, and remain closed, of course, when the pool is not being used, as to be consistent with the other approvals that we have made in the past.
I would agree. Any other relevant factors to discuss on this one?
It would be the comfort of the applicant looking at a fence, you know, to if they were to install a fence around the pool, they'd want to be comfortable with their surrounding neighbors, you know, and to make sure that however that fence is installed, it would afford them as much privacy as possible, and to screen the existence of the pool from anybody that may have found it an attraction, you know, to go over and use, if a pool cover were not installed to add the additional safety factor that we've already discussed too.
Okay. Any other factors to discuss? Okay, so where did we land?
Unfortunately, I don't think that we've met the criteria for granting a variance. My opinion.
I'm gonna have to agree just based on we just didn't agree on enough of these. It's a hard one. It just, we don't on this one. I do believe this should be something that's brought up to city council going forward. I mean, this needs to be more of a citywide approach to this, especially for, it's easier when they're on properties that have different features and different privacy features to it already inherently in the property, which this one does not have. So I'm gonna have to agree that it does not meet the standard right now for variance.
Yeah, and I agree exactly with what you're saying, and if it comes to council, we need to be considerate of the zoning districts that we're gonna be approving this in, you know, to include, you know, RSD, of course, but with the addition that, depending on the placement of the pool, depending on the topology of the land, depending on the presence of additional housing, you know, nearby, where we may be creating an attraction, you know, we may or may not wish to, you know, have a fence installed. You know, there are pools that have fences and pool covers, and there are some that have pool covers. Fine, you know, and the actual merit of both or either, of course, is open for discussion, you know, and I don't know how that discussion's going to come out.
Okay, so based on all that, do I have a motion to approve or deny this variance?
I move to deny variance 2210, 6040 Garber Road.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Weeks?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
And Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
Okay. That was a really tough one, and we are sorry. We appreciate the discussion, and like I said, we will definitely bring this to City Council, make sure it gets pushed to them.
Enjoy your pool.
Okay, well, we still have one more agenda item on our, yeah, sorry.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have one more agenda item to discuss the memo from city planner to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Okay, after all that, what would you like, what would you like to bring up on that one?
So this felt like a board meeting. These are the tough discussions that, in my mind, a variance should bring about. We're not going to deny every variance, we're not going to approve every variance, but you dissected these, you looked at it from every angle, is exactly what, I'm kind of saying in this memo. So tonight was a beautiful meeting.
The memo was very helpful. It just helped clarify like our findings of fact and how we need to discuss those, and I just appreciate that, so.
I think
I think the direction of trying to come up with compromises versus just saying no, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys had, I learned from you guys tonight, good, you guys said great things.
Yeah,
Trying to pick up all that.
yeah.
It took a lot longer, though.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Probably twice.
All right. Is there anything else on that memo we want to discuss, or I think
how'd we do, Coach?
from all that, I think we did well. Should we close out the meeting?
Yeah, I give you all high marks for tonight. That was a great meeting.
Let's, do I need? Any upcoming cases?
Great question. At this time, no upcoming cases, but I will be in touch later in the month and let y'all know if we get anything. All right.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to close this meeting?
I move we close the meeting at 10 o'clock.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everybody.